Rodrigo Juan Raval is one of the few helpful characters that Claire and Chris Redfield will encounter during the events of the game Resident Evil Code Veronica X. Born to a small village family located on Rockfort Island, Rodrigo's relationship with Umbrella would be forged in the destruction of that very community. The owners of the land, the Ashford family, destroying the small village to erect a training and detention facility on the island. This turn of events leaving the villagers with few other options, and many would join the Umbrella security service, Rodrigo being among them.
What are you saying?
You're free to leave the complex. But you may as well know you have no chance of getting off this island.
And what about you? What are you going to do?
Don't worry about me.
The story of Rodrigo Juan Raval as we know it begins with his birth on Rockfort Island in the 1960s. While little is known about this time in Rodrigo's life, it's likely that he had a typical upbringing for the area. A heavy emphasis on family permeating through the culture and instilling in him both a pride and duty to those who came before. Unfortunately, these values would be pushed to the side as the Umbrella Corporation would decide that Rockfort would make the perfect location for their new training facility. In the 1990s, Alfred Ashford would order the village to be destroyed to make room for this new construction. The people of the village either being forced to evacuate the land or join Umbrella as members of its ever-expanding security detail. With his entire life being taken and nowhere else to turn, Rodrigo would choose to sign up with a corporation, eventually making his way into the role of head of security for the 3rd Division of Umbrella's Paris laboratory. Rodrigo, while still fairly green, had proven himself a capable soldier. And when a woman named Claire Redfield would infiltrate the Paris labs in search of information about her brother, it would be Rodrigo himself who would manage to apprehend the threat and personally take her to Umbrella's detention facility located on the very island that had at one point been his entire world.
Don't move.
Rodrigo would succeed in his detainment of Claire Redfield, but would be unfortunate enough to get caught up in an attack on the island during the short span of his visit. A rival corporation to Umbrella, known as the HCF, had come in search of information about the T. Veronica virus. Ambushing the facility and freeing many of the BOWs held on its grounds, the HCF would throw the entire island into chaos. And during the battle, Rodrigo would receive a devastating wound to the torso. With Umbrella's forces being decimated and his wound growing ever more severe, Rodrigo would start to think about the events that had brought him here. Umbrella had taken his home, taken it and turned it into an absolute abomination. For what they'd done on Rockfort, he was disgusted, not only with the corporation, but with himself, for allowing the resting place of his ancestors to be turned into a breeding ground for such disturbing crimes against humanity. In apathy and shame, he would decide to do the only thing that he really could in his current state, and free the prisoner he'd brought in earlier, setting Claire out into the chaos as he resigned himself to the slow, painful death his torso wound would eventually bring. However, to his surprise, kindness had not yet entirely abandoned his homeland, as the woman he'd freed would return with medicine to stop his profuse bleeding. For this act, Rodrigo would give Claire a lockpick, and as the two parted ways once again, he would decide that perhaps he should visit the graves of his ancestors at least once more. Making his way into the catacombs, Rodrigo would reconcile with the family he'd felt he'd abandoned. And as another new face would arrive on the island in search of the woman he'd set free, Rodrigo would assist him in the little ways that he could. But, unfortunately, the evils of Umbrella were not yet done with this despairing young soldier. Rodrigo Juan Raval is one of the saddest men that can be found on the grounds of this lonely island. A man who would see the absolute destruction of his homeland not once, but twice. A man who had joined up with his enemy and would feel such deep revile for himself for that fact that he would allow thoughts of death to become almost a comfort. Yet, despite these negative aspects of his life, thanks to Claire, he would find his redemption. In respecting his family, he would again find love, and in the end, in death, he would finally find peace.
Looks like I can meet my family again. Here. Take this.
What?
She gave this to me as a token of thanks for saving her. I won't need it